Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Secretary Kerry, let me echo what others have said about your excellent service around the country and all you're doing to try to bring peace to many of these difficult regions. I'm glad you mentioned Roberta Jacobson in your opening, and I think other senators have mentioned her here. I've worked with her extensively. I think she's a very capable career State Department person. She, you know, as you said, she doesn't make the policy about Cuba. And so if you're objecting to the policy, it doesn't make any sense to hold up her nomination. And I went down last week to the Senate floor to offer her name in consent, and it was objected to. And I can just tell you, this is an area that she's nominated for Mexico to be the ambassador to Mexico. This has a real impact on my state. The state of New Mexico borders with Mexico. We have dramatic trade that's going on from, in the last 15 years, it started at about 7.5 million. Now it's up to about 1.2 billion. We have all sorts of cooperative kinds of things we work with Mexico on at the state level. And so I'm just wondering from your perspective, what is the impact of not having an ambassador to Mexico and recognizing that we've had, Secretary Kerry, this has been vacant for 6 months, and this is one of our very, very strong trading partners. Could you speak to that?
Well, Senator, thank you, and thank you for your support for that effort. Look, everybody here knows you all interact with our ambassadors when you go over to these other countries. They spend a lifetime of service to our country, gaining skills over 20 and 30 years. And there's a reason we send them to the countries we send them to. It's because they are particularly suited to helping us to advance America's interests, to build the relationship, to help to explain our values and choices. But in this world right now, particularly, notwithstanding instant communication and email and the way in which we can communicate directly, foreign minister to foreign minister, having an ambassador on the ground who builds relationships, who knows the people in the government, who understands their difficulties, who has a sense of the politics of that particular country, helps us to be able to get our policy implemented. And here we are. We just had a North American security dialogue in Canada the other day with the Foreign Minister of Mexico, the Foreign Minister of Canada, and myself. We have a huge North American interest. We have energy challenges. We have border challenges. We have narcotics trafficking. We have violence. We have the challenge of Mexico's help to help us prevent the flow of those children coming out of Honduras, Guatemala, and Salvador, coming up through Mexico into the United States last year, and so forth. I mean, you can run a long list. Counterterrorism. The needs we have on a daily basis to have our nation properly represented by an ambassador is absolutely critical. And we're just hurting ourselves, and we make ourselves look silly, frankly. And we insult the country that doesn't get the person. They're sitting there saying, what is this, punishment for something we did or didn't do? And they don't sort of understand this process. So, you know, I spent years and years up here, as you all know, and we usually got to the point where we could have a vote. Not one senator or two senators or rolling holds between three senators preventing the country from doing what the country needs to do. And I would hope that we just have a vote and let the democracy decide whether or not the Senate's will say that Roberta Jacobson should go to Mexico and help us with all these issues.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. And I would applaud Senator Corker. He has tried to move these nominees forward, and what has ended up happening is they get bogged down on the floor. And I'd like to shift to another area that you just mentioned, because it's an area that we also work with Mexico on, and that's the just vexing and problematic situation in Central America. This is having an impact on my state of New Mexico because we have many unaccompanied minors who are staying at Holloman Air Force Base. And the real central question here is how are we with these three countries in Central America that are you have drug-fueled violence, you have corrupt governments, you have very weak governments, and how are we going to move ourselves in a better situation so that migration doesn't happen? That's what I'm very concerned about. And we, in this budget deal, as you're very aware, helped significantly in terms of State Department funding for Central America and for these three countries. So I'd like you to discuss any progress that has been made to date with respect to implementing the U.S. strategy for engagement in Central America. Has there been any change in migration patterns that could be attributed to this effort of which we're undertaking? Would the funding requested for 2017 be used differently from previously appropriated funds for the region? And how long do you think we're going to have to work on this to really make an impact?
Well, we're going to have to work for a fair number of years, Senator. As you recall, we just were able to celebrate the 15 years of Plan Colombia. And I remember in this room when we passed Plan Colombia, $1 billion, and a lot of people were, wondering for one country over a 10-year period what that was going to do. I think it saved the country, together with the country's commitment itself and its leaders, to try to stand up to the narco traffickers who back then were destroying the nation. And today, Colombia is one of the strongest countries in all of Latin America and doing an amazing job in many, many respects. So these investments are critical, and that is what the administration has decided to do and is doing with respect to a number of countries, not just El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, but also Belize and Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Panama. We're working with all of them to try to address the causes of these folks sending their kids into danger and trying to come into the United States. And it has to do with violence against young people, has to do with narcotics trafficking, has to do with lack of opportunity, education, health, and other ingredients. So we have found that what really does make a difference is to help these countries to be able to help themselves, and that helps us. So we're engaged in a major effort to try to professionalize the law enforcement, to reduce the illicit trafficking, to reduce the smuggling, the transnational organized crime, the gangs. And I think we have $750 million we've asked for. It's a down payment on the full $1 billion plus that we want to put into this. And $359 million of that is for bilateral assistance, and $390 million is regional assistance for the things that I've just talked about. I'm convinced if we follow through on that, this is going to reduce the numbers of people trying to come to the United States across the border, and it will significantly, in the long term, strengthen those countries and our relationships with them.